Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in. Today's explainer is focused on demystifying what is, honestly, one of the most astonishing pharmacological mysteries in human history. We're going to look really closely at the hard science, the unique chemistry, and the clinical data behind a traditional brew that has completely captured the attention of modern psychiatry. Okay, let's dive right into this.
I want you to just take a second and imagine the sheer vastness of the Amazon basin. We are literally talking about tens of thousands of different plant species. And yet, centuries before anyone in a modern laboratory could even spell monoamine oxidase, indigenous peoples somehow solved a molecular puzzle that realistically should have been impossible to crack by sheer trial and error. They found the exact two plants in that massive forest rainforest that, when combined, completely bypass the human digestive defense system. It's a genuine ethnobotanical mystery, and I gotta tell you, the neuroscience behind how it actually works is truly mind-blowing.
To make sense of all this, we're going to follow a really structured journey today. First, the botanical mystery. Second, the two-plant synergy. Third, quieting the default mode. Fourth, the rapid antidepressant. Fifth, purging and long-term effects. And finally, number 6, the MAOI safety risks. Let's get started.
Okay, Section 1, the botanical mystery. Let's start by looking at the core pharmacological problem that these Amazonian traditions somehow managed to solve. The whole thing revolves around a profoundly visionary molecule called DMT, which is found in the leaves of the chacruna shrub. Now, DMT is a famously powerful psychedelic. It's actually found all across the natural world, and even in trace amounts right now inside your own body. But, well, there's a huge catch. If you swallow it on its own, absolutely nothing happens. And this brilliantly illustrates why. The exact moment DMT hits your gut and liver, an enzyme called monoamine oxidase, or MAO, targets it. Think of these enzymes like chemical bouncers. They dismantle the DMT molecule instantly, long before it can ever reach your bloodstream, let alone your brain. So pure DMT is totally orally inert. If you're an ancient tradition trying to utilize this plant, you've got a massive, completely invisible barrier standing in your way.
Which brings us to Section 2, the two-plant synergy. This is where the story gets incredibly exciting. How in the world do you bypass that gut enzyme? Well, you have to find a chemical shield. The absolute genius of ayahuasca is entirely in the combination. The first plant, the chacruna leaf, provides the DMT. We can think of this as the visionary engine. But the second plant, Banisteriopsis caapi, the vine that actually gives the brew its name, is the real game changer here. This vine contains a family of compounds called beta-carbolines, and they act as the chemical shield.
So let's look at the chronological sequence of this synergy. The beta-carbolines in the vine are monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs. When you drink the brew, those vine compounds temporarily block the MAO enzymes in your gut. They distract the bouncers. Suddenly, the path is completely clear. The DMT survives digestion, enters the bloodstream, and successfully crosses the blood-brain barrier. Because of this protective shield, the brew creates a beautifully paced 4 to 6 hour visionary state. It gives you a slow rise, a sustained plateau, and a really gradual return to baseline.
There's a quote that elegantly sums up this dynamic. The leaf has the vision, but cannot deliver it. The vine has the key, but no door. Neither plant produces the ayahuasca experience all by itself. It's this perfect lock and key metaphor. Together, they form one of the most sophisticated pieces of plant pharmacology humans have ever utilized.
Now, let's break down the precise chemistry at play. First up is DMT, which acts as an agonist at the serotonin 2A receptor. That's basically your classic psychedelic trigger. Then we have harmine from the vine, which is a reversible and selective MAOA inhibitor. And that word reversible is huge. It means the chemical shield wears off cleanly, rather than lingering around your system for weeks like older pharmaceutical MAOIs used to do. Finally, we have THH. This weakly inhibits MAO but also blocks the serotonin transporter, which gently pushes the whole system in an SSRI-like direction. The tradition didn't just figure out how to make DMT active, they essentially engineered a prolonged, incredibly chemically complex journey.
Moving on to Section 3, quieting the default mode.
So what is actually happening inside the human brain once this perfectly shielded molecule arrives? Back in 2015, researchers like Palejano Fontes ran a landmark study where they actually put volunteers into an fMRI scanner right after drinking ayahuasca. What they observed was a profound effect on the default mode network, or the DMN. For a bit of context, the DMN is this midline brain system that maintains your ongoing sense of a narrative self, the constant voice in your head.
The brain scans showed a clear, measurable reduction in both the activity and the connectivity of this entire network. As the DMN quiets down, subjects report this characteristic loosening of self-boundaries and a really profound feeling of unity. Basically, the brew is actively quieting the brain's self-network.
Section 4. The rapid antidepressant.
This unique ability to quiet the brain naturally led researchers to wonder, wait, could this treat modern psychiatric conditions? Which brings us to a remarkably important 2019 clinical trial out of Brazil. These researchers ran the very first randomized placebo-controlled trial of a psychedelic specifically for treatment-resistant depression. They took 29 patients who had already failed at least 2 prior traditional antidepressants. They gave half of them a single dose of ayahuasca and the other half a carefully matched bitter brown placebo liquid. This rigorous setup was a massive deal. It put a centuries-old jungle brew squarely onto the map of advanced modern psychiatric research.
And the results? They were stunning. But what really stood out was the speed. In just one single week, the ayahuasca group showed a significantly greater improvement in depression scores compared to the placebo group. The response rates were markedly higher by the end of just those first 7 days. To put that into perspective for you, conventional antidepressants usually take weeks, if not months, to show any real clinical effect. This was incredibly fast. But it gets even more fascinating, because as it turns out, the vine isn't just a delivery system for the DMT. Laboratory work, notably by a researcher named Morales Garcia, shows that the beta-carbolines from the vine are deeply therapeutic all on their own. These compounds actually stimulate neural stem cell proliferation. They actively promote neurogenesis, which is the birth of new neurons. They also have anti-inflammatory effects and modulate BDNF, which is basically the brain's key plasticity signal. So think about that. In that one cup, you are getting molecules that open the mind, right alongside molecules that actively protect and repair the physical brain.
Section 5. Purging and long-term effects.
Now, we can't really talk about ayahuasca without acknowledging the physical toll it takes. No honest account leaves out la purga, the purge. In many indigenous traditions, the vomiting and diarrhea aren't seen as annoying side effects at all. They're actually the point. It's viewed as a symbolic, emotional cleansing. But here's the thing. It is also entirely biologically predictable. The brew is a highly potent serotonergic agent, and our human gut is incredibly dense with serotonin receptors. Specifically, it hits the 5-HT3 receptors, which directly trigger nausea. The neuroscience here perfectly aligns with the tradition. The brew is physically designed to move something out of you. So naturally, you might be wondering, what happens to people who drink this intensely physical brew hundreds of times over the course of their lives? Researchers like Boso have studied members of syncretic churches like Santo Daime who use the brew regularly in their ceremonies. And the findings are actually highly reassuring. Long-term users show a thinner posterior cingulate cortex. That's a core hub of that ego-driven default mode network we talked about earlier. But alongside that, they show a thicker anterior cingulate. And crucially, there is absolutely zero evidence of cognitive impairment or psychiatric deterioration. In fact, these individuals generally show highly favorable trends in well-being and psychological resilience. This highlights exactly why this research matters so much. Sustained brain plasticity over time can lead to genuine, lasting emotional resilience.
Section 6. The MAOI safety risks.
Okay, I need to shift gears to a highly cautious tone here for a minute. The science is absolutely fascinating, but we have to be absolutely clear about the physical dangers. The very mechanism that makes this brew work is also its greatest risk. Remember how the vine acts as an MAOI? Well, MAIs have incredibly serious drug interactions. If you combine ayahuasca with modern antidepressants like SSRIs or SNRIs, you risk triggering something called serotonin syndrome. This is a potentially fatal surge of serotonin in the body. It is an absolute medical necessity for anyone participating to taper off serotoninogenic medications well in advance, and that must be done under strict medical supervision.
So the crucial point is that the contraindications don't stop there. The brew is physically demanding. It significantly raises your heart rate and your blood pressure. Because of that, people with significant cardiac conditions are at real risk. Additionally, personal or family histories of psychosis or bipolar I are strict contraindications. Even certain high tyramine foods can cause dangerous reactions when mixed with MAOIs. Make no mistake, this is a very potent, biologically taxing substance.
Tragedies have occurred, and sadly they usually happen at unregulated underground retreats that completely lack proper medical screening and support. I want to remind you that this explainer is strictly for educational purposes. It is not medical advice.
Scientifically speaking, it's also really worth noting that it is genuinely hard to separate the physiological effects of the molecules from the rich ceremonial container of music, diet, and community in which it is traditionally consumed. That context was developed over centuries to keep the user safe.
To synthesize everything we've looked at today, I want to leave you with this beautifully summarizing thought. The cup holds two plants, a solved enzyme, a quieted self, and a science still catching up to a knowledge older than writing. It's just an incredible journey, going from an ancient ethnobotanical mystery in the jungle to a modern medical reality inside our brain scanners.
Which leaves us with this final provocative question to ponder. As clinical trials expand, how will modern psychiatry possibly integrate a synergistic plant brew that fundamentally challenges our understanding of brain repair, neurogenesis, and the very nature of the self? It's a profound question, and the future of psychedelic neuroscience is going to be incredibly exciting to watch unfold. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.